Good morning, Vietnam. Here I am back again. Yesterday I posted a video on what I thought was another pathetic, bad reporting, non-investigative journalism by the New York Times. It was 2 days old, but today, as I read the New York Times this morning, my favorite not reporter, or at least a opinion columnist there, Mr. Thomas L. Friedman, one of the most racist people at the New York Times. He's such a Zionist, such a pro-Israeli guy. It makes you sick, because God forbid he would say anything positive about Arabs, probably only about Arabs who support Israel. Anyway, his article is titled, "Iran just made a big mistake. Israel shouldn't follow." Well, I think it's the exact opposite. I think Iran, and I've written quite a few notes on the article, and I'm going to read my notes and only comment on what he said very briefly. I will say from the start, this was a highly orchestrated attack on Israel, a very accurate, calculated attack. Excuse me. But it was not meant to do any real damage, as we have seen. It may have also only been Iran testing the defences of Israel, their air defence, of course. And also it can be Iran offloading a lot of its older hardware and testing its older tech, especially with the drones, and as it develops better military hardware. The purpose of the attack after the bombing of Syria, of the Iranian embassy there, was not to do any real damage, but to show Israel, and especially the US, that it can fire thousands of rockets and drones into Israel. If it wanted to do any real damage, it would have sent the missiles and drones that cannot be all stopped by the Israeli defense system. Iran has developed high-tech drones now for over 20 years and has precision ground-to-air missiles, as Mr. Friedman says in the article later, that in fact Iran has quite sophisticated ground-to-air missiles, and they could have hit almost anything Iran wanted to. Iran is only making a point, and the stupid Israeli Defense Force and the US Defense Department is reading it, I believe, completely wrong. They think Iran is not capable of inflicting any damage on Israel. They've already forgotten that a few hundred Hamas soldiers and what they did on October 7th last year. But both countries have bit the wrong end of the apple, as per this clown, Friedman, has stated in his article, and who wants to call himself a journalist, God forbid an investigative journalist, or a thinking journalist. Iran will never go all in until it knows it can win or do enough damage where Iran can still survive the way it is. It is not anywhere near as stupid as Saddam Hussein, who tried to bluff his way out of being invaded twice. There is a strong possibility if the Israeli Defense Forces now attack Iran as a retaliatory strike, it may influence the other Arab states to join Iran. Then it is all over for Israel. As we know from 67 and I can't remember, 76 war, Israel was so close to being defeated. Now let's dissect a little bit this hopeless article. He starts off, "It would be easy to be dazzled by the way Israeli, American and other allied militaries shot down virtually every Iranian drone. cruise missile and ballistic missile. But how do you know that? We don't know that for sure. We don't. There's so much more investigation to do. And you're writing this article more or less the next day without knowing almost any information again. And I write, like you were dazzled by George Bush and Dick Cheney and General Colin Powell at the UN speech. But you were 100% wrong 22 years ago. Maybe you're wrong again today. And he goes on. There now needs to be a massive sustained global initiative to isolate Iran. Dude, I write, but they have been doing that now for 40 years. And it has only hurt the local population. The US has made also no effort to help the population to get rid of the mullahs. They more or less abandoned the Syrian resistance forces under Obama. Obama should have insisted on a no-fly zone very soon after the, the spring uprising. But he was such a coward, he did almost nothing. But of course, when the West thought they might help, it was too late. The Russians got involved and they did their own no-fly zone over Syria. And that was the end of the resistance. The US then definitely walked away from the Taliban just after the Russian occupation. As people may recall, the US supplied the Taliban with ground-to-air missiles. I forget what they're called. You put them on your shoulder and fire them. And that is the reason why the Taliban and all the other resistance fighters defeated the Russians. The Russians were simply suffering too many casualties. But, again, the US and the government walked away. They said, oh, we've done our job. Let the Taliban work it out. Let the people work it out. Well, guess what happened? The Taliban took over, and look what happened to the country. And then what happened in when the forgotten his name. They attacked the Twin Towers, and the rest is history. If they had gone in economically to help Afghanistan then, Afghanistan would be a totally different country. If the US had any brains, God forbid, like they destroyed Iraq after they invaded it and made all the wrong decisions, and I believe, and I've said this a long time ago, the US Foreign Department are the dumbest group of people ever. They couldn't predict the fall of the East German Wall. They couldn't predict anything. Actually, they haven't been able to predict almost anything. And they only come first because I think the Federal Reserve banks of the Western countries are the dumbest people, second dumbest people on the planet. So he wants to isolate Iran to deter it from trying such an adventure again. But also to give reason to Israel not to automatically retaliate militarily. That's what the whole point of it is. But Israel will not attack anything on, I don't believe it will, it has tried. Wasn't it back in the early 80s, the Israelis destroyed a plant that was supposedly purifying uranium? But Israel, I don't believe, will attack directly. I think then too many Arab countries will maybe side with Iran. So he goes on. So there must be major diplomatic and economic consequences for Iran, with countries like China finally stepping up. I don't think China will ever step up and be for Israel and against Iran. Iran probably does a lot of business with China. He goes on, when Tehran fired all those drones and missiles, it could not know that virtually all of them would be intercepted. Some were shot down over Jerusalem. As I said in my opening statement, I believe, I'm reading from my notes, it was intended. Iran does not want an all-out war with Israel at the moment, as the US, especially the US Air Force, is way too strong. But there could be serious damage to Israel before the US Air Force got in a position to really attack Iran and prevent any more damage to Israel. I believe if the Iranians use their best weapons and attack in a more coordinated effort or calculated strategic effort, I think the Iranians could have hit anything they wanted yesterday. So I say, all these actions are purely to keep the US involved in the protection of Israel. I said that in my video a few days, a week or so ago, when Israel bombed the Iranian embassy in Syria, that Israel will forever do these hit-and-run tactics until either Iran goes all out and attacks and forces the US to get involved in defending Israel, or if the US forces Israel to give up and allow Palestinians a homeland. But it means that Netanyahu has to go. And this is one of the biggest problems with the US Defense Department, the Foreign Service, Biden. They don't know how to get rid of Netanyahu. I don't know why the US is so gutless and why they are insisting on protecting Israel to this degree. Friedman goes on, but Israel has never launched such a massive missile strike directly at Iran, and Iran had never done so to Israel either before this. Well, and no country has attacked Israel directly since Saddam Hussein from Iraq did with those Scud missiles 33 years ago. Yeah, but there was no way these Scud missiles were going to do a lot of damage, and Saddam Hussein knew that he could only, again, like I think Iran did yesterday, just tell Israel that they can be attacked anytime and they can have extensive damage if they really wanted to give them. Again, Friedman thinks that more sanctions will harm Iran after 40 years. It is all the same rhetoric. They do it again and again. Isolation. They tried to do that with Iraq. Now they're trying to do it with Iran. They're doing it with Syria. And guess what? The guy is still in power in Syria. So what are they going to do? Now he's got Kofi Annan quoting. The ex-UN Secretary General told me, is the best way to separate the regime from its people, reassure Israel and Israelis of their security, and remove the need for further regional military escalation, which would be a gift to Iran and its proxies. It's been going on for 70 years, you morons. Nothing is going to change. Why? Anyway, I write, the only way is a peace deal. That's the only way we're going to stop any war, any escalation, any tit for tat, back and forth, Israeli going into, what are they going to go into the next country and bomb the Iranian embassy? They have never really tried this. How many US presidents? Clinton tried it, Obama tried it, but no peace deal because they just back Israel too much. The US government has never really tried to support the people of Iran. So what the F is Kofi Annan saying? Why did he not do, when he was head of the UN, do anything for the people of Iran? Why didn't he force a peace deal through the UN Assembly? You know, a peaceful land deal, anything. But nothing has happened. And Friedman says, it is also the best way to ensure that Prime Minister Netanyahu does not drag the US into a regional war to shore up its own crumbling political base. It's Israel that's the problem, you idiot. They're the ones going to escalate the war, just like the Syrian embassy bombing. And it is the only way for Netanyahu to stay in power. And he claims it is impossible to exaggerate the political military implications of what just happened. I think he's so delusional. He's such a Zionist and anti-Arab, and he always has been. He's so pro-Israel. And he claims Iran just unwittingly revealed to the whole world that Iran's government is so penetrated by Western espionage agencies because so many Iranians hate their own government. Oh, I'm sorry, there's no basis for that statement, no backup, nothing. Just talking through his ass again. I write, that is impossible to know, as I mentioned in my opening statement, as they are experts in drone and missile technology. I mean, the Iranians. Who knows what they're really doing or really going to be up to? And he claimed who claimed? Veteran military correspondent, another expert, has said the impressive Arrow system interceptions have garnered most of the attention, but Israeli and American pilots downed hundreds of cruise missiles and drones. Again, I'm not sure how many drones and missiles were fired and how many, of course, that most of them were intercepted, but what was the intent of the Iranian government in attacking the way they did? And as we know, the IDF are total born liars. Anything they say, you can take it as a grain of salt. And he goes on now he's an expert on military warfare, and he claimed that the Iranians were really going to attack the air base in southern Israel. Again, this is pure speculation with no proof. And now, it's crying wolf. Oh. Instead, the Iranian attack may have been limited to badly wounding a 7-year-old Israeli Muslim Bedouin girl hit by falling shrapnel. And if that's how effective Iran's offense was, its leaders have to now be wondering how good its defenses are. If Israel now chooses to retaliate, Hezbollah has to be asking the same. Again, I believe this was taken as a test run, as if Iran would give or tell anyone their true capabilities. And, Mr. Friedman, what about the over 30,000 dead Palestinians up to date? How many 7-year-olds? 10, 12,000 children now have been murdered by the Israelis. Why don't you say something about them? And then he goes on about the protest by the spectators in a soccer stadium and how they were shouting anti-government slogans. Of course, we know this. It's the only probably correct, true, honest thing Friedman says in the whole article. But what can they do about it? If they say anything, they get put in jail and they disappear. Because the US and all the other Western powers haven't helped the people to get rid of the mullahs. So he goes on to say how smart he is again about the regime's obsession with destroying Israel. And he quotes the poor Kurdish woman 1.5 years ago that died in morality police custody. And of course, thousands more were arrested because we don't help them. And he's given his perfect opinion again, which we know that Iran supports the Hamas war. And of course it's to deflect their treatment of the local people, the Iranian people. We know all this. Stop making redundant, stupid statements. And here is the biggest truth of all, right at the end of the article. No one should think Iran is just a paper tiger. Tehran could still unleash thousands of shorter-range rockets against Israel through Hezbollah and through other organizations, even Hamas. And because some of these rockets have precision guidance, they could do significant damage to Israel's infrastructure. Iran has bigger missiles in its arsenal as well. That is exactly what I said in my opening statement, but you put it right at the end of your article. So anyone thinks that you're such an expert, but you hide the real truth at the end of the article, like so many people that don't want you to tell you the truth in the beginning. As I write, this is the truth, I said at the beginning. That is why Iran is only testing the Israeli defenses. And I also believe that the real fighting will be with ground forces as well as air, planes, missiles and drones. Will the US commit to ground forces then? I don't think so. Because every time they have, it's almost been a total disaster. And then he makes his final paragraph statement of how smart he is. And he finishes with his last sentence. The sound within Iran and the resistance network on Sunday morning is that sound you hear from your car's GPS after a wrong turn. Recalculating. Well, I think it is you who's going to have to be recalculating soon if the war escalates. And I write to finish. You should exclude yourself from everything. The next time Iran unleashes on Israel and it destroys the Knesset, what will you be saying then? Thank you for listening. I can't help myself dissecting and being in total disgust of so many articles out of the New York Times. It is so really in the end, a right-wing newspaper and so pro-Israeli. It's tiring, but I feel like that is something I can do, and I will keep doing it until the New York Times starts writing and reporting and investigating and writing articles that are true and really can give the citizens of New York and the world correct information. Thank you. Until next time.